Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service here to present Diurnal Charts. We're going to be using the book Forecasting Diurnal Charts, and the Sophia Mason is the author of the book. I'm only going to do the mechanics today. There could be a greater interest in the whole gambling aspect of this because you could, and I do know astrologers that have used this technique for gambling. And if there's an interest, I would be happy to do a video on it. But today I really wanted to start with just the mechanics to try to get people interested in the diurnal angles, or I like to call them, it's called the diurnal chart, but I always refer to them in my product list as daily angles. And I'm going to show you how I work both ends of that. The product daily angles has been very successful for me, as has been solar returns and lunar returns. And I always tell people, particularly if you're not really good at lunar returns or you still need to keep working at them, because ironically, they all get better as you work with them. I used my own chart for a lot of years to teach myself, and for both of these. And I had really good backups because I had wonderful teachers. For example, I know that somebody had commented that they don't really work for them. And I think that's kind of sad, because when you really study lunar returns, there's a whole philosophy that because it is a lunar return, it's not always about you. Sometimes it's about the people that are around you and how it indirectly affects you. The other thing about lunar returns is, even though they happen every single month, they can last months. Diurnals are done for the day, but they can last a month. So realize that even though we're talking about something that has a very limited time frame, it actually is more expansive than we realize. So what we're going to do today, my goal, is to teach you the mechanics of how to erect a diurnal chart for yourself, and also how to look at events, upcoming future events, through diurnal charts. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be using a specific individual. I thought about it, but I just couldn't go that route. Several things kept holding me back. The only two people I could really do would be the president, Biden, or Trump, because he was a president and all of the information, actually, believe it or not, is already in my software. But I really sometimes don't like doing sitting presidents, because there's a lot of things that go on in their lives that are not forthcoming. Okay. So it makes it harder to interpret the chart, number one, because there's a lot of secrecy around them. Number two, I didn't really want to do Trump's chart because it's not a great chart. It's an ugly chart, actually. I've done a lot of work on it, and I just didn't feel like up to it today. Plus, I've had so much trouble with my software, which is why I'm already in this format as we begin. So before I begin, I do want to thank you for watching the video. I want to thank particularly my subscribers who faithfully are helping me build this channel. I know it's taken a while, guys. It's an educational channel, and the educational channels are really a niche for certain groups of people. So unfortunately, I don't have great expectations of this being a booming channel. However, if you would like, share, and most particularly comment, I'd really love to hear from you. It always helps the channel as well. Now, I am an educator and I have a private business, which is why I don't have to have all of everything coming in through YouTube. I'm just putting it on YouTube because it helps my website, which I'm building as an educational source. Now, speaking of education, the first thing that I want to do here is I would like to show you how to erect a chart using diurnals. So we're actually going to start. I'm going to cancel that. We don't need it. I did get these charts from my political list, which is where Biden's information is, as well as Trump's information, but I'm not using that. I'm going to use the United States instead. I think because it's easier for the whole world to see. It also has much more of an interest to the rest of the world. And I think it's just going to be easier for all of us to see. Now, if you would, while I'm doing this or afterwards, do your own chart and get a real feeling for this, okay? Now, I'm just going to pull up the Sibley chart, the one we're familiar with. Now, when you do a diurnal, the only thing that really changes on here is this date, okay? So instead of 1776, we would be putting in 2022, and I'll actually use today's date. Now, the time is going to stay the same, and that includes the time zone that this was taken in. Now, because this was not or is no longer a time zone that we use, it does shift automatically to Eastern Standard Time, which is the +5. So it actually works. It takes the 39 seconds off, but I don't think that's going to make a big difference. The longitude and latitude will stay completely the same. Philadelphia is Philadelphia. And it wouldn't matter where you were in the country, you would still use this. We wouldn't use Washington because that's not where this country originated. It originated in Philadelphia. If you're somebody who lives in Australia and it's a -11 area, I don't care where you move. You keep that area, longitude and latitude, and you keep that -11 in order to find your daily angle. So, things that are going to be really important. Well, you're going to want to know where the sun is at all times. In this case, we're looking at a Jupiter rising because the original chart, well, Jupiter happens to be not far from the sun and it's conjuncting Venus, okay? This is an indication of things that we're going to be looking at in all the house cusps. Now, I'm going to try to put the two charts together, but I'm going to be really honest. When you're looking at a bi-wheel, it gets rid of my whole outside asteroid list. And one of the ways in which I really learned these asteroids over the years was through diurnal charts. I called them daily angles, but it's the same idea, and you'll see that in a minute. On a diurnal chart, we are still going to pay attention to these angles, but we're going to now really nail them down in terms of orbs. We're also going to look at things that might cusp houses. So we're not going to just look at the ruler of the house, but also the aspects of the planets within the house, and also the ruler of the rising sign of that. So this is a birth chart. So this isn't really a diurnal. This is the basis. So this stuff is really important. Your natal chart becomes critical when you go into a diurnal. And you could tell because we're using all of the information from the birth chart. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Sibley's February 8th, 2022, which is the day that we're looking at this chart. Now, notice that the sun rules this chart. And, excuse me, the sun, okay, is right above the descendant. Which, by the way, guys, descendants are other people. It might be how other people see us, but there's a real distinction here of other people. Now, we're looking at a 17 degree, and then we're looking at a 20 degree, and the sun is going to keep moving, and the ascendant is going to keep moving. So what happens is that it's a real slow process, even though it's only 3 degrees, to get from 17 to 20. So I really hate to say this, but that might be when we have an issue with Russia. Because the descendant is other people who see us. And I think there's an issue between us and Russia. I don't think that anybody in the world will disagree with that. But the sun is referring to a male entity that is a descendant. Okay, another person. Okay, another. And look at this coming at the same amount of time. Okay, so today is, I'm just going to say this for the heck of it. Okay, today is the 8th, but I think that within the next week, we are going to be hearing more about what is going on in the border of Ukraine. And also think of the sun as Ukraine, okay? Saturn is here. Now, yesterday, Saturn was at that descendant. Okay. And it's ironic because apparently there has been some movement out of Russia. Now, with that said, remember that Ukraine is actually one of our partners. Russia is our enemy. Both of them can show up in the seventh house. Okay, because it's an open enemy. The Uranus, which is only 3, here we go, is like that sudden, unpredictable energy, okay, which, okay, this is where you have to know astrology. But realize that Uranus is ruled by the sun. The sun rules this chart. I hope that you're following my pattern of thinking. Okay, so Uranus does make a really important place in this chart because it rules the sun. The sun is very close to the cusp. So within the next couple of days, maybe a week, because it does take a while because the sun is going to move a little bit slower than the ascendant, but not really that much slower. It takes a few days, but it will get there. And with that said, and being it's in Aquarius, we want to look at Uranus. Uranus tells us, yeah, about 3 degrees, same distance, is an unpredictable act. Okay? And then we come down here is going to be, this is so accurate. Okay, I look at Shiva and Shiva as, I look at that as withdrawal, but it's really about, okay, think about this. When I think of that kind of withdrawal, it's usually to rebuild your forces for destruction, or it's the destruction that's occurring before the rebuilding. So a lot of times when I'll say to people, you're going to have a withdrawal from your work, sometimes it's because they really are redoing the shop, the store, the whatever it is. Okay. So with that said, we have a couple of things. When that Uranus is an aspect, it's going to be an aspect of Hygeia, which is health and well-being. And we are concerned about the health and well-being of one of our partners. And so you see how that fits. And this could be, here's a chart that once again, I could go on and on and on and on with, because ultimately what we would do is go around the chart, and you see Cupido A is faces. Yesterday that was together, and that's like looking at somebody's faces or their stance or their appearance, and it was about an appearance of something that was going on at the border. You would continue to go around and you would pull up, look at this, there's going to be, and this is without fail going to happen, it's a communication, third house cusp, and it's happening within the next 24 hours where there's going to be some kind of overreaction. It is retrograde. Who's overreacting? I don't know. Okay. See, this is where charts, now it could be that we're overreacting to a move that Russia's going to make, and that is very possible. Now, how much of an overreaction? I don't know. It's retrograde. So when you start reading these charts, and this is the same thing with lunar returns for all of you out there, please bear in mind that part of your being here is to interact with others, to make others accountable, to stand in witness of others, to be a part of others. And I think that when we look at charts, we're so sun-centered that we forget that we're not here alone. We don't do this journey on our own, that somebody around us could be going through something that affects us or could cause us to have a reaction. Okay? Again, charts are not 100% the other person. It's also how that other person interacts with others or society. Okay? So there's an overreaction that's going to occur. We also know that there's a Shiva, health, well-being. So in other words, there's an action, and probably an overreaction, but an action that will take place because of the well-being of other people. So you continue and you do this throughout the whole thing. Look at this. Shiva. Are we not looking at destruction and destructive tendencies? Sixth house, work and service. Withdrawal here, the base. Okay, withdrawal is also destruction. But it's also Asian countries, and we happen to be having an Olympics in China. So there we go. A chart means everything it can. So we're not going to just talk about Russia. We're going to talk about China. Okay. And some of the issues with both Russia and China are coming up because of the Saturn. In other words, the lines are being drawn, and we are developing our responsibility based on that. Okay. On a side note, it's the Saturn return for the Republicans, which I don't think will go very well. So there could be more like the RNC thing that just happened where, Republicans are really set up right now to rip away our democracy in favor of autocrat system. And some Republicans will tell you that's not true, but it is true if you listen to what's being done and what's being said. And they're trying to make out the coup to be something that it wasn't. And it was a coup. It was an insurrection. It was Trump trying to take over our country. And he's still at it. And the reality is that hopefully something will be done soon. But do you see how the sun, Saturn, Uranus, Apollon, even Apollon. Okay, now Apollon is passing away. There's a lot of many's at that point, but it's still very tied in. Okay, so and that is just a little mini lecture. I didn't even, let's just finish the chart here. Yes, just rewards right on the 8th house, which means just rewards all that it can. Just rewards against China, justice with Russia, justice with Republicans, most particularly the head honcho. Okay? It's all coming out. He can't hold it up much longer. And the reality is he screws the Republicans by holding it up, so that even if you're a normal Republican, you may have to vote Democrat because the party itself is switching or wants to switch the government of the United States. So justice is coming. And Jupiter, healing. Do you know what's going to happen within this month? Mask mandates go away. I know that. As an astrologer, somebody once asked me, and this was back at the beginning of 2020 or maybe even the end of 2019. As an astrologer, I knew that COVID was coming. We all did. And somebody asked me, when is it going to be over? Well, it's not really over, but as of February of 22, this is what I used to say, we will have a resolve. We will be on our way. And it's not that there won't be cases. It's just it won't be like it was. And people were like, oh, horrified. Well, guys, we've made it, okay? So healing is here. See it? Jupiter. And the beauty is Jupiter, since this is the United States chart, rules the chart of the Sibley. So hurrah. Okay. And that's hurrah for the whole world. Now, it's interesting because there's a Victoria that happened yesterday. Now, I don't know what that was, and it could have something to do with the Olympics. It could have something to do with Russia. And here we go again with why I didn't bother working with Biden's chart, because so much is not. We don't live, none of us, anywhere in the world, live in transparency societies yet. I think that day is coming. I just don't think we're there yet. And that's why people might say, well, we're not in the Aquarian age yet. Well, we are, but it takes a long time, at least a decade or two, for things to begin to settle into that age. And one of the issues that we'll be dealing with, and I think we'll be dealing with it by 2030, is the lack of transparencies in governments. Okay. So again, we got a lot of stuff at the 6 degree and 5 degree mark. So we know that it's been a rather exciting week. And of course, this is when the Olympics began. So how appropriate, right? So as I finish up going through, I don't think there was anything up here. That I recall. Okay. So I'm giving you a little bit of an idea. We've just been reading a chart that is absolutely accurate with today. And I could go on, but I'm not going to. I just really wanted to show the mechanics today. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to show you the way that I used to do these charts. Okay, first of all, before I do that, I have to get a pen and paper. And this is what you would have to do as well. Okay? Is that you would have to write down your ascendant. Oh, and I want to go through a couple of notes with you before I do. So we have a 1725 Leo and an 8 Taurus. Okay. So we do have Uranus in midheaven. But just a couple of things here. When you're looking at a diurnal chart, you're looking at a chart that indicates the basic actions for the month ahead. It forecasts minor incidents and eventful days and sometimes major events. And that it does. I can attest to that. It serves as a catalyst for timing slow-moving, transiting planets. Okay, and that's really important if we're going to look at like Pluto, for example, because it will really help you track it. Like in really close detail, okay? And in our case, Pluto at this particular time is getting very close to Mercury, or Mercury's getting very close to Pluto within the next, here we go, next 2 days. So if I were to track this over, and it's in that 6th house again, over the next 2 days, and knowing that Pluto is the ruler of the Scorpion house, which sits at the 4th here, which is where the health and well-being is, where that Shiva is. And remember, Shiva is the cusp of the 6th, where Pluto and Mercury are. And I believe that it is kind of warming us up to the fact that some of the Pluto stuff for this country is going to start coming out in communication, relating to our day-to-day work, day-to-day lives. It will be coming, I believe, in the next couple of weeks, in the month of February. Okay, it's also, it can determine the best times to handle money, lotteries, and winning. And that's the part where I said, if you really are interested in this, I can get to that, because I can tell you right now, the cusp of the 5th house, which ironically does feature Jupiter for the United States chart. And we know that Jupiter is now sitting at the cusp of the 8th house. What it means to us is that we are gambling with somebody else's resources. Oh, and we are. Okay. And with that said, we should do well. I believe, looking at this chart, we're going to do really well with all of the above things. Okay. It talks about how, I did tell you that all the changes at the date, we went through that. One of the things that we didn't talk about a lot, and I do want to get into, particularly as we move toward the angles of the chart, and that I'm going to be doing in the dial, is that you got to realize that the moon moves 1 degree every 2 hours. Okay? The moon is very important. Okay. Now, there are slower moving moon ascensions and faster moving moon. There are slower times and faster times with certain things, and they're always the same. Okay. So whatever the ascendant sign, it directly relates to the house of the natal. In other words, if we were to look at the 17 degrees of Leo, we also know that the United States has so this is a really critical time, okay, for the United States. So if I were to go to my other chart very quickly and look at that ascendant in this chart, I would have to go into the 8th house. So which is the house of the combined resources. And isn't that what they're doing with Russia? Russia's coming up with China while we are gathering the rest of the Western world. Isn't that what that is referring to? The Olympics is about the gathering of the resources of the world. It's pretty profound, I think. And so I'm going to go back to my diurnal. So moving on, whatever, I already went through that. So all aspects transiting and natal will be taken in account when interpreting. It emphasizes the ruler of the ascendant. So even though you're looking at all the planets and aspects, and we can do that simply by pulling up a report, looking at our aspect list, and but look at this. This is telling us that we're not all that confident. Now, it is separating, okay? But there's a lot to look at here. Excuse me, I need some tea. It's very dry. The heating systems. So now, all aspects, transing and natal. So we would have to look at this list, and then we would have to look at the original list, start comparing them, and they will start telling you a story. It also talks about how the rulers can indicate something being affected on a physical level. Okay? So it can denote illness, for example, or weaknesses. All right? And I'll give you an example. If you had a chart with a Neptune ruler, that could be a factor, okay? So in our particular case, we're looking at health and well-being, but mostly of business. We're not really looking at, and apparently health and well-being of business is quite good in this particular country. So we're doing okay there. But if you were to look for, and I believe Neptune presently, there it is in the 8th house, which really is, here again, we don't know what other people are doing. It's 21 degrees to a 28 degree Pallas. Pallas is also in the 8th grade. We don't know what other people's strategies are. Okay, so that's where the chart is the weakest. Now, they're not in aspect. They are about 7 degrees away, which is really far in a diurnal chart. Okay, but Pallas isn't far from the Aries point. It's only 2 degrees. So, and 2 degrees is, pretty much an aspect. So there is an aspect to, so the whole world is going, what? Sure they are. They should. Okay. So, all right. So we did talk about that. There's also, one of the things that it talks about is if one of the planets involved, okay, like the ascendant, sun, if they happen to be, or as I pointed out, we got all the way to Uranus because Uranus is a factor. It rules the sun. If it falls on an angular house, which it did, or even into an angular house. See, this is where we go again with how far can we go? The angular houses are very, very, very important. So that would be the 1st house, the 7th house, the 10th house. These houses have a way of bringing the stuff out on a physical level. Okay? It's also talking about how the aspecting planets could be aspecting an angular house at the same time. Well, did we not just have that? Okay, so we have Uranus, which rules the moon of this country, in an angular house. Do you see how important that becomes? It becomes really important. So if you have an aspecting planet, and that aspecting planet, we're doing it right now, is in aspect. Look at that. That's astrology, by the way. It means astrology, by the way. It really is important. I wish that people in our government would, although I don't, because I think it was misused by Reagan, so I take that back. On the aspect, okay. So one of the aspects, okay, so we did have that with Uranus, okay? Diurnal charts are considered timing charts. And the reason why is because this thing is going to move 1 degree every day till it travels 360 degrees, actually slightly less than a degree. And also I did want to point out that the moon moves rather quick, and the short ascensions, that's what they're called: Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. Long ascensions: Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. Okay, so they demand more attention in the houses. The long ascension does. Okay, the short ascensions are quick. So if we look at our moon presently, we see that it's in Taurus. It's coming to the node another 3-4 days. Boy, this is like everything's happening in a few days. And that particular, that's a quick ascension moon. It's going to be hitting that node, even though it's about 4 degrees apart, it might be only 3 days. Okay. Because again, it's a quick. Most of the angles of the chart, when you look at the chart, the most important thing we're going to look at is the angles, but I'm going to show you why in just a minute. It's also kind of a cool thing to do diurnals for new moons and full moons and even quarter moons, because they offer you a great deal of feedback on where you're, what's going on in your life and what you might be able to expect. Jupiter in the natal fifth is good for gambling, and I'm going to get to that. If Jupiter were to fall into the natal fifth, well, we have that. The United States has that right now, so we'll be able to really check. It's also good when the natal fifth is equal, when the Jupiter is trining, okay? And the irony is that the natal Jupiter of the country, I didn't want to do that. Not yet. What I want to do is this. When you go to the natal Jupiter, which is up here at 5 degrees, it's not, neither chart is it in trine. So we're not gambling here. Okay. I just wanted to check that out. That's some of the stuff that you would look for. Now, what I want to do, and my notes are telling me to do it now, is I'm going to go back to this chart, which is I had the right chart up, which is the chart I want to take. And what we're going to do is, first, what I've done is I've written down the angles. Okay, this is important to make sure that when you get to the dial, that you're going to be able to go right to the ascendant and to the midheaven. You're thinking to yourself, well, you can go there by go to the planet, right? Well, sometimes solar fire works and sometimes it don't. And sometimes it's just better to know this. The other thing is we're going to have to do some math on this. Okay. I'll show you that in a minute. So what we're going to look at in this chart is we're going to look at 17 degrees, 25 minutes, which should be right there. And that should be our ascendant. I'm actually going to put it to the minute so we can be exact. So ironically, as an astrologer, what I would do is I would look at all of those midpoints and notice how many of the midpoints involve the Aries point. So whatever is happening worldwide. The Olympics, Ukraine, all of it, okay? It also shows, even within our own issues, like the whole Uranus moon and the Republican RNC thing that's pretty accurate. And look at this, Kronos Neptune. Is that because Merrick's taking too long to punish Trump? Or is it because Trump is on a rampage? Or is it because people want to know what Biden's doing? I mean, that could be a lot of things. But one of the things that I would do as an astrologer is I'd go through each one of those midpoints. Okay? I would also take that number And I would write it down on a piece of paper. Okay, so 4725. And what I would do next is I would go to the 2230 point, which would be, okay, 69.55. So then to get 22 on this, and that's what it equals, 69.50, just a beyond Jupiter. But we could actually, we might be able to, it's about 30 minutes. That's a little bit, because Jupiter is technically at 9. So I'm off by a minute, but look at this. Aries sun. Look at this. Mars midheaven. It is about war, by the way. Our future and war. Mars midheaven. Okay. It's mind blowing. Look at this Hecate for intuition, and look how close it is to Pluto. I'd actually probably include Pluto and Jupiter in this axis. I probably would, because you're about a degree. And I think you can go a degree. It's not Pluto. Excuse me. It's Mercury. Remember the news. Why did I think Pluto? I knew it was Mercury too, because Mercury is right before that. So I would probably put that Mercury, which is good news. Remember that there is healing coming, and that I do believe the United States is going to get some good news. So these numbers, okay, so I would take these numbers now. And those numbers, what I would do, and this is how you really learn your asteroids. I'm not going to bother with it today. I didn't want the video to be too long, and I really only wanted to show mechanics today. But you take these 4 figures and you go around and look at the asteroids. And the asteroids now will tell you a story. Okay? And I've done that enough. I know that, you would know that, but that's how you would do that. Like, I can even look at this and say Panacea is there. I'm sorry, not Panacea, Pythia. I'm making all my mistakes again. Pythia means that you're intuitive. Hecate tells you that you're intuitive, but Pythia tells you that things will not go exactly as you think. So though you might have a handle, you don't have the resolution. So then we move to the midheaven. And the midheaven was 8 degrees, 42 minutes of Taurus. So that would be here. Okay, and I can even go by the minute. We can go right up to 42. So again, I would repeat the same thing. I would look at the asteroids. I would say there's a beginning coming that involves vehicles or is ornamental in some way. In other words, I think that even what the Russians may try and prove may not be, might be more ornamental, just for show in a sense. But you see how that works. And look at how Hestia, work and goals are very involved. And the whole object is that we do have work and goals as a country, and we are focused on them. So you would then begin with your, which would then be 4842, because it's, no, I'm sorry, it's 3842, and that really is important, Colleen. So we have 3842, and what you would then do is add 2230 to it. But you want to make a note, maybe even of what this number is here. So that comes then at 83, and again, it would be 42, where I'm off by 4 minutes. But again, you could see how that works. And you could do the opposite. You could even subtract it. So it just comes down here to 6112. So it would be, Persephone, being alone or going it alone. So there are some aspects of this that the United States is going it alone. That is interesting, isn't it? But one of the things that you really want to do with a diurnal is you really want to pay attention to all of these midpoints. Look at this. This is interesting because it's Uranus-Neptune. It's unpredictable actions that we don't, we're just unclear about, right? It's Neptune. So this is going to tell us a lot about what's going to happen, not just today, but maybe even in this month of February. And what I would really love to see is more people trying things like diurnal charts so that you can become even more proficient at your astrology. But more importantly, for anybody who is interested in asteroids, one of the best ways to learn asteroids, and I do speak from experience, is to do diurnal angles, do your daily angles every day, and then do what I just did for you, but come up with the asteroids that are literally within 1 degree of each of these 4 points. Ultimately, it doesn't take long to do this. And it is something that I used to do faithfully for years. And it really did teach me a lot, not just about daily angles or how to use them, but it taught me a lot about asteroids and what they mean in the most subtle ways. It also taught me a lot about how the chart isn't always just me, but it could be my daughter, it could be my significant other, it could be anybody who's close to me. So with that said, I will leave you, as I always do, first thanking you for watching the video, and again asking you to please like, share, and comment and all that stuff. But most importantly, if you know somebody who's interested in astrology, please let them know that not only am I doing work to help astrologers and to help develop astrology, but the website divinationcounselingservice.org is a place where you can go read articles, because I'll write an article on this as well, and maybe even start accumulating knowledge. I'm also letting people know that I am available for private work. I do tarot cards as well as diurnal charts. I do lunar and solar returns. I do secondary progressed charts. So almost anything that is a product of astrology, I probably already do it. But check out the website. It tells you even more. With that said, until we meet again, I wish you only happy reading.